Welcome back. Welcome back. Another Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. We got some special guests today. So we got for the first segment, we're going to talk about this Fathers Against Violence. So right now we got Sydney Connors in the studio. What's up? Hold on, I got to turn your mic on. So we got Sydney. Go ahead.
How you doing?
Okay. And then also, so our guest for the show today, we have Tanese Horton. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
And so first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Fathers Against Violence.
Okay.
All right. Which, Sydney, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I got brought on to Fathers Against Violence recently. Mm-hmm. I am a part of the iFilm 216 program, which is a program for film and TV with Marquette J. Williams, who has a studio on East 40th and Payne called Studio Zero. They do a lot of projects in the city, filming projects. We also are doing a lot of just events throughout the summer. But I got brought on to produce Fathers Against Violence, which is a coalition to bring together fathers within the community and talk about how we can heal and repair the community from, one, the violence, but also just mental health of Black men in our community, and how we can come together and kind of have Black men discuss more, especially with the Black boys and the youth, how we can heal each other and how we can be there for each other and accountable and provide so that we're not going through these things with the violence. Because a lot of the youth are going through this violence because they just don't have any resources or any opportunities or nothing to do. So I think our biggest thing is, one, opening up the film studio so that we can catch videos of Black men in these in these spaces, or even, and not just sad or not just hurt, but also just like happy. I think our community needs to see Black fathers a lot more. Not only just to help the youth, but to help like just all of us. I feel like a lot of us have that missing piece of that Black father. So just seeing more images of that is our goal with Fathers Against Violence. We've also been going to different locations in the community, like Dave's and St. Luke's, and a bunch of people have been backing it. And they've been, you can go to these locations to get more information. You can go to these locations to also get flyers and stuff. And you can ask us to bring flyers to wherever your location is, whether that's a school or a business, so that you can push Fathers Against Violence.
So one of the things that I always enjoy is when anyone takes an interest in Black males, and definitely Black fathers. Why do you think this is, the time that we need to, start focusing on it now?
For me, I just got done doing middle school teaching for 6th, 7th, and 8th in my homeroom with 7th grade boys. They became my extra 17 sons, and just the way that I see young Black men growing up right now, and just some of the conversations they would have with me, I could tell that they just need more representation of what a Black man looks like, or what it looks like to be a successful Black man, or even if it's not someone who is making $1 million. I think the only examples they have are like content creators and celebrities, and we need the doctors and the lawyers and the business owners and the radio hosts and just them to see different ways that a Black man can exist. And I feel like we only see really negative images of that a lot. And so my biggest thing is just, I feel like the more we pour positive imagery of Black men, the better our community is. It's bound to build better, just because that'll bring us all together in a better way. And it'll probably end, not even probably, it will end a lot of the fear mongering, a lot of the traumas around it, all those things. It's just conversations I feel like our community really has to have, starting with us. And outside of just like, I feel like we have a lot of conversations about what's going on around the Black community and how it's affecting us, but not what's going on within our community and how it's affecting us. So I feel like this is a step.
I think the wild thing about it is, over the past, since the 60s, right? So for a while, the concept of breaking up the Black family. So back in the day, you had welfare, you had those things. And I remember, I'm a 70s baby, but I remember that you couldn't have, when the Section 8 people came around, you couldn't have any men's things inside of the home. And so you would have these families, in order to get the Section 8 or to, to live and function, they would have to remove or keep things in boxes. Or, when the Section 8 people came around, and then bring them back. So this concept of bringing back the family or bringing back the black male into the family is something that has definitely boomed in the last 20 years, I'm gonna go ahead and say.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so. And I'm not with my children's father, but I have a boy and a girl, and my son lives with his dad.
Okay.
But we have a great co-parenting relationship. But my biggest thing with my kids is the involvement of their father, regardless of what our relationship was. And I think that's also a conversation that has to be had, especially for people. I'm 32, so for those of us who are in our 30s and younger, I feel like we have not had that conversation of the importance of black men around or black fathers.
Yeah.
So we do see a lot of issues with like arguments and keeping them away and doing all this other stuff. And I feel like that has to be a conversation too. So I think that Fathers Against Violence is something that can really push people to see black men not only in this negative light or only in this blaming them only for the violence when a lot of them are experiencing the violence.
100%. And I like how it's broken up. It looks like it's broken up into certain categories. So first one is education. Obviously, we're trying to ensure that we educate. Second one is that open dialogue. So for this program, can you talk a little bit about this concept of open dialogue with men about violence?
So we want to get an open dialogue because there are a lot of men in Cleveland, like especially fathers who have lost their child to either gun violence or whatever else, or some of them are in prison. And that's another thing like that affects a lot of fathers too, whether they discuss it or not. Knowing that your child is in prison, you can't do anything about it. And so I think our biggest thing was that we have not seen a lot of these men discuss what that feels like to lose a child to the violence, or even what it feels like to almost feel like a lot of them describe it as helpless, or a lot of them describe it as like they can't control it. And for men, we kind of want to see them transparently discuss that more so that we can heal and help them heal it. Because a lot of the men I was talking to, they didn't want to talk about it. Right. Because they were like, well, once we talk about it, nobody's going to do anything. Right. And so I think that that's my biggest thing with this project is doing something. Yeah.
And the idea what's also creeping up is the black male suicide rate is also creeping up. And, last month I did a show on black male suicide. And one of the things that I spoke about was this idea of dignity with men. Because if we're talking about the open dialogue, or the next one is the conflict resolution, but specifically the open dialogue. When we're talking about the open dialogue, what we're really trying to address with men is having the opportunity to have their dignity restored in, amongst, their peers, and how to not necessarily demand it from other people, but definitely, request it, and how, if it doesn't happen, how to better, if we go down to the conflict resolution, how to better handle it, from those that you aren't getting it from, because the violence part is the problem.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. And I think that a lot of our community, we don't discuss conflict resolution a lot. And I'm real big on conflict resolution, especially as a teacher, and these parents, I'm super big on conflict resolution. But I think that those things will really, I know for sure that just these steps will start to show such a change in the community, because more people will start even being accountable again for one another. Right. And I think that with this violence stuff, a lot of people don't even want to. They're like, I don't want to have any emotion towards it. I don't want to care.
They normalize it, actually.
Yeah, they normalize it so much that they're like, oh, well, it just happens. We're just
it is what it is.
Right. And so we want to change that. We don't want it to be a normal thing. We want it to be more so normal to discuss how we can heal it, or normal to discuss how we can make the change. I
think the wildest part, because that third point, so one was education, two was open dialogue, that third point was conflict resolution, and then that fourth point was seek safety. And there's so often to where there's certain groups, right? So we have pockets of group. We all have, everybody has pockets of groups. And what happens when you outgrow your pocket of group? And if that group or that pocket is a violent oriented, so how do I seek safety? I mean, I'm a therapist and I work primarily with men. And one of my clients was was recently talking about how he don't feel safe around his crew anymore, which is weird, right? Because he had been with them for as long as he can remember. And he felt bad. He felt shame and guilt for admitting that these individuals who I'm around now, I no longer trust. So that, that fourth point of seeking safety is something that I see in my day in working with the population I work with, that I'm constantly bringing up.
Wow, I love that though. I love that a lot of men are starting to even open up about that. I grew up with mostly women, but the men in my family, I was blessed to have to be emotionally intelligent. So they definitely could share those things and be emotional and do that. But I love how it's like these, a lot of the men who come off as really hard, or shooters or whatever else, are starting to be like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to open up. So that's what I really want to normalize. I feel like Fathers Against Violence can normalize that, so that you're not too hard to go sit down and cry about whatever you're going through. It's okay.
Because it's hard.
It's okay to cry.
Life is difficult.
It is very difficult.
So the last point, I know you have the iFilm that we want to talk about. So the last point is reporting. Yeah. And what's funny is when I read through it, when you and I were talking beforehand, this idea of reporting, which is also called snitching, right? Exactly. Yeah. So how do we get to normalizing this concept of I need to tell someone? Because this is what happens. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. We're not gonna go tell nobody. We're going to go handle it for ourselves, and keeps the cycle of violence going around. True. So that fifth point of report, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, the way I think, I don't think you're a snitch if you're not involved in the life. So, if you're not involved in the life, you really can't snitch on anything. Right. But if you're involved in that life, and I get it, but I still think that even then, there still should be a moral and principle base within that life. I feel like there at one point was my grandfather and everybody was deep into that type of stuff. Yeah. So I know that there are rules that were set, and I feel like the youth now have kind of gotten rid of those rules a little bit. Right. But getting back to even those rules, because it was a parameter that they set to keep things at least kind of civil, or not too much. And for me, I don't think it's snitching, especially when it has to do with like your life and your safety and the people around you and their life and their safety. Your growth.
Don't forget about that part.
And all of it. It's very interesting that people even go to this like, oh, we're not going to snitch. We're just going to. And I get the whole street justice, because sometimes
there's sometimes they just don't handle it. Right.
Is a lot. But even then, even with the street justice, I feel like there's ways that we can still come together as a community and figure out how to do that in a better, less violent way.
That's the hope.
The hope.
That's the hope. Like, seriously, in all honesty, that's the hope. So the last thing, or, before we, jump on our break, tell me about what iFilm is. And we had iFilm is located in a place where they totally revamped everything. Yeah. So that's over in the CSU area off 40th and Payne. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Marquette J. Williams, he actually is a famous director and writer. He was living in LA. He wrote a movie called Fatherhood 101 that went pretty big in 2013. He decided to come back home, and he wanted to open up opportunities for especially Black youth, but people in general who wanted to get into film and TV. Right. Because some of us I lived in both LA and Atlanta, and I've also lived in other cities. So I know just Cleveland doesn't quite give you how the industry works.
You think? Yeah.
So his goal is to show people how the industry actually works. And he wants to, and also getting people into actual opportunities when it comes to production, direction, film, all of that. So he started the iFilm 216 program, which is open for adults and youth. So whether you're coming straight out of high school or whether you're an adult and you're like, I've been sitting around and I want to do TV film. So that is what we do down there. And it's open for everybody, and they are doing programs. We actually have a conference coming up this summer where we'll be just teaching people about the products, about the equipment and all that stuff. You just come down there and get to know people and meet directors and meet all those types of people. Okay. And I'm producing a bunch of events this summer down at the studio. So everybody should, everybody
You're not going to shout yourself out?
Oh, yeah. I will shout myself out.
You got to shout yourself out, too.
Yeah, I'm, everybody knows me as Chi Chi, but I do events and everything in the city. So we are going to be doing an event called Funk Garden with Steven Johnson is his name, and Alex Price.
I like that.
So it's going to be, you can think Grown and Sexy, and it's just going to be in the back outside. We have a whole garden, stage, drinks, and vibes and fun. We'll also be doing movie premieres in the back this summer too. So you can sign up to do that.
Grown and Sexy.
Yeah, Grown and Sexy.
Grown and Sexy. Okay. Well, I appreciate you stopping in and definitely giving us this information. So if anyone listening, they can go to fathersagainstviolence.com, and they're updating everything.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And then if you have for the iFilm, you can go to ifilm216.com.
Yes.
Sydney, appreciate you.
Thank you.
I thank you for, being a part and coming in. So we're going to take a quick break and come back on the other side. This is WOVU 95.9 FM. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. Now let's get back to our guest. So we do have a guest. So we have Tanese Horton. What's going on, Tanese?
Oh, nothing much and everything at the same time.
So we have Tanese Horton, which is a director of, and I had it in front of me, but at everything that we had going on, I wanted to make sure that I get it right. So you are the director of what exactly?
Family and community engagement at the Centers for Families and Children.
Okay.
Located right here in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
That's where I am.
Okay. And you've been with the Centers for how long now?
I guess it's really, time has passed quite fast, and I don't necessarily count the years as I pay attention to what I'm doing. But it's been about 10 years. Okay. Yeah, in different capacities.
Yeah, and so all of the capacities. So before we jump into that, I do want to go backwards. You've done some work all over, like in DC, Cleveland. Yeah. Can you tell me about all this?
It's been a lot. I you guys asked me for my bio, and I was looking at it. I was like, oh, you've done a couple things. Yeah. Tanese. But I started working with children and students and families in DC, in Washington, DC. Okay. I went to school in Ypsilanti, Michigan, for those who know. Yeah. They know. And that was a wonderful experience. I did not want to come back home. I'm from Cleveland. Yep. And I was looking for areas that were very diverse. They had this progressive feel of Black people being movers and shakers. And so in my mind, those were three cities that came up. Okay. Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Chicago. Right. So DC, we had family, and it was just divine order. I got a job there at the university, George Washington, doing some wonderful work. I was able to travel through their admissions department, and I made a mark there working with students who were in different types of communities. I developed an organization that specifically had a focus on recruiting students who were Black and brown. And that group still is in existence to this day. Yeah. And I did the same thing at Cleveland State when I worked there in admissions. So nice.
So you had a hand in the amount of color that we had in school. Basically. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because you got to say it like that. So you went from there, and you said you're from Cleveland.
I'm from Cleveland.
And you got your degrees here and then left?
Well, I got them in Ypsilanti. Yeah, both of them.
And then left, and then came back around.
And then I stayed in DC, which was a wonderful place. I mean, you're in position for and purposed for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Right. And I think that time, although I wasn't necessarily wanting to leave DC, it was the things that came about kind of put me in a position where I had to leave DC. I couldn't afford it, basically, is what I'm saying.
I was about to say.
Yeah, basically,
let's just keep it real.
I was trying to color that up. Right, but I was living life wonderfully and poor. Yeah.
What? Hey, nothing wrong with that. Especially if you ain't got no responsibilities.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I had a dog, Sasha, and that was it. And I did buy some property, so that was good. But I was definitely living check to check. Very cute though. And then when I left there, I came back home because I'm glad I have a village that I can come back home to and be like, hey, you know what? Let me sleep on the couch for a little bit because things are a little tight.
Yes, let me get a little
tight
bit.
Right now.
I got you. I got you.
And I got a job at Cleveland State in admissions, and I did some wonderful work there. Okay. And I stayed there for quite a while too. And after CSU, There was something coming around the pike in the Bend, in the Cleveland area with Cleveland schools.
Yeah.
And it was a wraparound program. It was pretty much citywide. Mm-hmm. And I was part of the inaugural class cohort of professionals who implemented that. And I'm very proud to say, and it was a wonderful experience. And that's where I got linked with the centers as a wraparound coordinator for. Shout out to Harvey Rice School. Love y'all still.
We do accept shout outs here.
Okay, thank you.
No, we do because if we don't shout them out, nobody will. Yeah. And the idea, so go backwards a little bit, this concept of wraparound. And so this is Mental Health Awareness Month. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the real wraparound, not the one that we hear about that can be sometimes viewed in a negative level. Like when you were brought in and wanted to do the wraparound model, what was it like for you?
I can go so many directions with this. The first I'll talk about specifically what it was like to enter uncharted waters for a person, and feeling as though you're kind of in a fight by yourself. Yep. And you have to lean on whoever you believe. I'm a believer in Christ, and you have to kind of just keep forging on. And so some of the bad things and people and principalities that got in the way of me trying to do the Lord's work in that way were kindly knocked down, not by my own doing, but just period. So I'm going to talk about it by my own personal kind of journey through it.
Yeah, I got you.
And then the second thing, we're talking about being a servant.
Yes.
And so when you're looking at serving populations, and you talk wraparound, but it's really, I look at it as being a servant. And so you're looking at each person individually and recognizing what I could help to support them with. What do my skills and gifts have in order to help you along your journey?
Exactly.
And so that's what I think about wraparound work. It has its tentacles in terms of the book definition.
Correct.
But for when you really are truly connecting with individual and engaging with them in a way that is purpose for them, you have to look at them in their situation individually, because Mr. Johnson's, his support that he needs may be different than Mrs. Johnson.
Right.
So I think that part is truly important for you to be impactful in any type of way during the work.
Yeah. Because when we think about wraparound, and for those that don't know, it's literally you taking the individual and you're attempting to service every aspect of that individual with various services.
Yes.
And so what happens is, to be perfectly honest, there are times when bureaucracy gets in the way and personalities get in the way.
It does.
And I think that's where the whole wraparound concept get lost, because it is literally something that, collaborative care is something that we use right now, but it's also wraparound, right? So it's the idea of connecting services for one individual to promote a better quality of life for that individual.
Yes. And their families.
Right. That part too.
Yeah.
That part too.
And their families. So, but you have such a great point about systems.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we have that and it can be a barrier. And my role in that particular scenario was to help people to navigate or be the navigator of the system, so that those barriers can be kind of eased on out of the way, so that I could get to the real root of the problem with that particular person and or family. But I don't know what we can do about these systems. And that's an interesting question, because I think the very first time that I heard about wraparound was doing community work. Yeah.
And I think what frustrated me the most, to where I needed to leave community work, and which is sad, is because of the systems. And you had well-meaning individuals that understood literally what you needed to do to help this individual.
Right.
But we also had the bureaucracy. And so once a person goes from the service, direct service person, to the bureaucracy level, I'm not sure what happens.
I don't know.
I don't know what happens because the same people that did the work of wraparound, they get the title and they get the recognition. They just lose. I'm not going to say lose their mind. Things get lost. Let's put it like that.
Put it that way. Put it that way. Things do get lost. Man, that is like a real pause. And as I think about my current role, you know, that was a role where I was doing direct service. Yeah. And I also was very entrenched into the community because to me, that is a necessary
the village.
Yes. Piece of the puzzle. But now the role that I have is, one could say I could be a member of that bureaucracy. And let me explain that a little bit. Yeah. Because I'm an administrator now.
Right. Yeah.
And I now train others who are within direct services. Right. So I do think, however, because I've had that experience and I'm super sensitive to the matter, that I have a full context and not, understanding about how that can get in the way and do my best. Right. To help them navigate.
To move out the way.
Yeah. And to move out of the way.
There's nothing wrong. Right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with systems. So when I say systems, and I know just like every other buzzword we have in our society, it can get bastardized, right? When I'm saying systems, I'm not saying that it's bad, right? Because you need an operational system. You need an outreach system. You need these systems in place because that's how things get going. But I'm not sure what happens along the way to where an individual that was literally just there on the cusp of burnout, they go to the next level. And it's like, I don't know if it's the people above them or they get to see certain things, but things get lost. Yeah. And so I know that I needed to, when I was in the service industry, I needed to do something different. And it wasn't because the people that I worked with, I loved them. It was just, I was limited in the things that I can offer because of the type of organization it was.
You got it.
Right. It's a nonprofit organization.
Got it.
And in nonprofit organizations, as you know, there's rules. There's rules. And in those rules, there are things that get cut off, right? There's some things that get missed. Let's just leave it at that. And in that getting missed, at times, depending on how a person feels about the work that they're doing, can cause a lot of burnout.
Yeah. And thank you for that, because just hearing it from your perspective and how you shifted, and as I always continue to learn and wanting to grow my staff and my team, just hearing a little bit of that gives me a new lens of light. As I'm training, as I'm helping them to professionally flourish. So that's helpful.
So we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, I want to talk about the centers, because that has gone through its own, what is the word I'm looking for? Evolution or renaissance over these past 20 years, and how people have viewed that place. So we're going to take a quick break. This is Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. Welcome back, WOVU 95.9 FM. This is Unapologetically Strong. We have Miss Horton. How you doing?
Hey.
I'm sorry, we was laughing on the other side.
Yes, we were.
All right, so we were talking a little bit about your history, and I love the fact that you decided to come home. This is where I have a problem, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox. We have such amazing things in Cleveland, but we got there are certain things that make people or allow people to leave who are brilliant. Right, amazing people, and I'm just glad you came back and wanted to offer this thing that you have inside of you, because I know it's hard to be here at times.
You talking about Cleveland?
Yes. Oh. Yes. So I know it's hard to be here at times, but I appreciate you coming back.
Thank you.
So yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah, take that. Plus, you're a Delta too.
Yes, I am.
There you go.
Proud.
I appreciate that. So we were talking. Your current position is with the centers.
Yes.
And you do outreach work in the in the field of, I hate to say it like this, so I can get it right, training individuals to go do the thing that they need to go do, so to speak. And so the centers, when I started in the field, was a place that came and got your kids. Yeah, the centers, that was the place where, you call the line and people and your kids, they come and get your kids and they go through, stuff like that.
Well, are we talking about the same centers? Because now this is a good point that we're about to make here.
Because it's the branding part, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, this organization doesn't really do that, though.
Okay.
The county may have that kind of thing out there where that's in the community, but for the centers, this nonprofit, that's probably the anti of what we actually do.
And I think that has been within last 10, 15 years? Rebranding of, because it's the centers, and then what's the full name?
So it used to be.
Yes, go for it.
The Centers for Families and Children, and then went to the centers, and then it kind of went back and forth, but it's always been the centers.
Yeah.
And it's always been a nonprofit that had several layers of services, but it's always been like a social service kind of agency, and that had early learning. It's had behavioral health for quite a while. It has had some areas of physical health, healthcare. Period. So it's kind of and it's had El Barrio, which is our workforce development program, but it's never been a place where they take the kids. Now, I will say this. Being in the community, that is the thought.
Exactly.
Of
there
what
you go.
This agency does.
Exactly.
Which is not it.
Right.
And
I understand.
You're right about the branding.
Yeah. I think if I go back to it, because even me, right, I had to when, I was introduced to you and go through that, I had to differentiate what the entities were, right? And my first thought was, okay, so this is, the place where you would call, when I was in the field, that would come get the kids and the social worker out and stuff like that. But I think the branding, because the centers offer so much. Can you talk a little bit about what they offer?
Oh yeah, they we have a new marketing kind of team, new VP, newish VP, who is working on our branding.
Yeah.
So I think that you're going to start, if you haven't seen it already, a little bit more of an evolution in terms of messaging.
Yeah.
And I think that that's needed, particularly now.
Right.
But we have a 5-star quality head start, the early learning program.
Correct.
Our behavioral health area is rapidly growing, from urgent care to offering HIV syringe exchange program in the community.
Which was taboo back in the day.
Big time taboo. Big time. Was it like 40 years ago? Yes.
Around that time?
Yes.
Because I remember the back and forth on how do we do this thing because it's a public health.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we also had, I mentioned our workforce development program, and where they have a lot of training available for anyone who's desiring to get some assistance in looking for a job, as well as preparing them for some certifications that we have through our agency. I'm trying to think. We have a dental. I mean, it's just a really well-rounded type of agency that is starting to really make its mark on the community in the area of social services. And it did before, but it's doing it in a very different way with our leadership that we have in play today.
And I definitely saw or could see the branding behind it, right? To bring both, because it was easier, for certain aspects, never mind. With that said, because getting into that is not going to be helpful today.
Okay. I'm glad, Eric, you know your limitations.
Right. I don't want to get into that today, but what I do I want to go back, because you you've had this opportunity to actually recently, you invited me, and I thank you. And I was able to speak with, parent advocates. No,
family. They're family advocates,
yes.
home visiting team. So people who are really doing that work out in the field.
Right. Yeah. So these were individuals. Right. They were right there on the front line. Individuals, and their jobs were to, what I was giving them just so happened that, at my segment was a self-care part. Yes. But they also had, prior to me, they had 2 other people there talking about something similar on how to, what is compassion fatigue? Yes. What is all this? Yes. So to pivot a little bit, how did you guys get into the business, which is very new, of supporting the people that does the supporting?
Hello. First of all, can we just acknowledge that it's needed?
Yes.
And when you are doing any work, but particularly the work of serving.
Yes.
And you're doing it in varied communities.
Yes.
It is very easy to adopt and carry their burdens.
Correct.
Along with your own.
Correct. To put that on your shoulders.
Yeah. And so our agency with, again, our new CEO is really an advocate. He came from social services and mental health areas, and he's very much an advocate of taking care of self and really creating a culture that is brave and open and honest so that we can disrupt any patterns that have been developed along the way, because that prevents growth. And one of those things is mental health.
Correct.
For you, for the person, the practitioner.
Correct.
And that means everybody from the top to whoever is on the front line. And so we asked our team about what would they like to see this season for their professional development. Right. And one of the things that I kept hearing when you talk about burnout, tired, being pulled in a lot of different directions.
Fatigue.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. Self-care.
Self-care.
Yeah, letting go.
Letting go, exactly. And so those things came up, and we listened to them. And so with that said, we took the time out to craft 2 days of loving.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was 2 days on loving on yourself.
Okay.
And so we took the approach of, first of all, we know you're not trained like a mental health clinician.
Correct.
And therapist, but we want to give you some tools in your toolbox so that you can assist clients, families in that who may be experiencing some challenges or some barriers in that area. And then we also want you to take care of self.
Right. That was, and I didn't know it was 2 days. And you're the person that put all this together, and you did a beautiful job. Like the flow of it, because so right before me, you had someone that dealt with compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is an individual who really wants to do the work, but don't understand that there's a level of disconnect that has to happen. And so they just keep piling in, right?
Right.
So it goes back to that thing. And I think I said this the other, when I was there, is just because you're capable of doing it doesn't mean you have the capacity of doing it. And then before that person, who was there in the morning? So
the topic for the very first session was understanding mental illness. So it was kind of like an intro 101 to some common areas of mental illness terms and areas that they may need to know a little bit more information about and how they present themselves typically in an individual. So it was more information for themselves so that they could assist families and clients.
So it was that, and then you had the compassion fatigue, and then myself. And then you had later on it was more of a gathering, but it was 2 days. So
the second day.
Yeah, what was the second day?
Yeah, so the second day was so your session, let me just backtrack a little bit. Your session was more delving into self-care.
Correct.
It was absolutely self-care. So it was really focused in on them and looking at that. And I think they, from the journey that they got, I think in ending with you, you did get some, I'll go ahead and say this out loud.
Go ahead.
You got some great feedback.
Thank you.
From your session. And the staff do want you to come back.
Okay.
So I'll just
you just throw that out?
Yeah, I'll just put that out there.
I'm a pivot though, but go ahead.
The second day though, the morning, we had a wonderful lunch because I treated them to a nice little gourmet lunch. Because food, feeds the soul, correct. I believe. And then
it's the truth.
Thank you. And then we also we did some business but it was like a learning circle roundtable discussion where it was focused in on really some of the elements of their job. Yeah. And then in the afternoon, we did paint and sip.
Okay. So what I like about that is you actively program developed. Because with the mindset of these individuals that are doing the job needs to be serviced as well.
Yes.
And so what I saw more than anything else was you took the time to actively, right, program develop in a way to provide these individuals value, because a lot of times we don't get that, right? So it's that concept of let's meet them where they are and we got to do this. And anytime they call, without realizing we're human too.
Yes.
We're human. So we're not going to take a break, but I do want to just do a brief announcement if that's okay with you. There you go. On the spot. Now let's get back to it. So what I enjoy, and that was hard for me because I'm wearing my Sigma. It's not hard for me. It's not.
I don't know how he kept it together because I was looking at him like I could have bought him a Delta announcement right here. I mean, he said, okay, that's fine. No shade to my brother's Kappas, but I just could have gave him something.
Hey, look, I just do. Hey, you saw Uni tell me what to do. Okay. Jay tell me what to do.
I saw.
I do what I do.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. All right. So let's go backwards a little bit. So in this segment, we got to land the ship, and one of the things in landing the ship, and I want you to stay because we do have providers that listen. We do have individuals that listen to our station that are providers, and I really enjoy this last, half decade or 5 years that now we're looking at burnout. We're looking at if we're not going to increase the amount of money we pay them, at least we better treat them better. And so what we were finding is, providers were also not getting paid what they needed to get paid. And then they weren't actually being respected as providers, as individuals who either are licensed or unlicensed, but they're still choosing to do this. So from your point of view, before we jump into, what we can do for the providers, for your, point of view, what else do you think is needed for individuals that are providers to further, ensure that we get more providers in this business? Because there's a lot of individuals that are absolutely not picking this business because of the pay and because of the weight that it takes, despite spending 30, 50, 60 plus thousand on a actual degree and license to do this thing.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I'm still trying to figure it out. But what I do know about people in general is that no matter what, money will pay the bills. And it is, it does have a place. Okay? It does have a place.
It does have a place.
Yeah, it has a place. However, if someone is unhappy in their environment, and then unhappy is a broad word.
Yeah.
To me, it's a broad word. You have to break that down. Do they feel valued?
Correct.
Do they feel acknowledged,
correct,
appreciated? Do they like the culture of the organization? Because usually they've gotten into this not for the pay per se.
Absolutely not.
Right?
Absolutely.
They've gotten into this because that's a part of who they are.
Exactly.
They are servant at heart, and that's what
correct,
they're deciding to do in this capacity.
Correct.
This is how they want to serve. And so there's other elements that I think agencies, corporations, organizations
right,
have to take and look at and invest in, and that is investing in their people,
right,
and really looking at them. I was talking to a team member the other day, and I said, "What do you do if you had to explain and write a novel or a how-to book on how you engage with your families.
Right.
And she said, well, I'm not there all the time, so I make intentional connections.
Correct.
And she said that there was a family she was trying to get in contact with and get them to seek mental health, actually, and they didn't want to acknowledge anything about that. Finally, through consistency, because she knew she needed something to someone to talk to, but through consistency, she did connect. But there was something that she said, and I uplifted it in the conversation. She said that she looked at her family member, the family, the client or the family member.
Yeah.
She looked at her, and I said, that's important. You really need to look at someone. Right. When you said, oh, how you doing? How you doing? You're not really asking them how they're doing. You may be just saying like a greeting, how you doing? But do you really care about, do you see me for real?
Yeah.
And I think going back to you asking me what people need, they need to feel seen.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's
seen.
the part, because there's a difference between, so a service individual, and if I can just speak just personally for me, what I remember is one, I'm a black male, so I was a black male fixer. Yeah. Which was waiting on me, right? Yep. So that did not account for any issues that I had as a black male growing up, right? So that was, because you are a black male, this is who you are, and this is who you're going to treat. Yes. And so being seen as, and saying like, or asking me, is this what you want to do? Or what is the demographics that you want to work with, would have done better. And another thing would have done better is understanding that there has to be a start-stop. And that start-stop has to start from the top, right? Agreed. And, trickle down to the people that you were with, or that is under you. A lot of times, people that I love them, great people, but they didn't understand boundaries, and they didn't understand how to educate people up underneath them to actually have boundaries as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So that is, again, another point that I think is important when we're really trying to save the profession in a way that we feed the folks that are doing the work in this capacity. Correct. And I just can't say enough that's I think the missing piece that organizations are really missing in terms of keeping their folks hired and employed and doing this great work that's needed.
Right. Because it's not always about money. No. Money helps. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I know we said that. It does.
But there's a bit of, understanding when you're in those classes, when you're taking those tests, and that you already know that you're not about to get rich off of this, right? You can get comfortable, depending on how you parlay it, but you're not about to get rich. So if we're looking at it in percentage, probably about, 60 to 65% of it is you're in it because of the passion.
Yes.
And when that passion gets disrespected, or that passion gets cast off, or you're not seen, then the greatest thing to help fuel you, right, is to leave where you're from and go do it somewhere else.
Basically. Yeah. And that's what's been happening.
That's exactly what's happening, because we produce in Northeast Ohio. So whether we're talking about CSU, John Carroll, Ursuline, we produce a fair amount of licensed professional mental health providers. And the idea is, where are they going?
Where are they going? Right.
They're not coming to you.
No.
Because I do see where there's shortages in different, community agencies. They're going different places, right? By hospitals or whatever. Where if we really want individuals to get back to the root, we have to understand that these individuals they're graduating. They're passing their tests. How do we get them? Sometimes getting them is simply just seeing them, as you said.
Agreed. And I have to, give a kudos to our team, my specific team that are in the field. We've had some long standing folks that have stayed for years upon years upon years, particularly in our early learning program. Good. So we've been fortunate enough not to have a super high turnover consistently over the course of years.
Okay. So I'm gonna say this, but I know it might not be reality. I'm just going by what I saw. So I saw one male in the group.
You're talking about when you did?
Yeah, when I did the in-service or the training on Friday, I saw one male. With that said, we're not going to explain the one male. With that said, what does it look like for your organization to do outreach for men of all colors, right? To not fill that room with men, but just have a little bit more representation.
Yeah, I think that's a growth point for us.
Yeah,
to be honest, I think I'm not certain, and I can't speak on that portion specifically, that we strategize to really implement something like that and be strategic and intentional about it. I'm not certain we've done that per se. But, food for thought that if somebody doesn't bring it up, you keep doing the same thing. Right. And you wonder why you got the same results. Right. And you wonder and you desire, yes, I think obviously there's value. I mean, we have a strong mission and moving towards the goalpost as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion within our organization. Right. However, there's still some growth to happen. Yeah,
and I'm not saying that because there are various reasons why you don't see one, because it's a feeling profession, an emotional profession. And so we're not necessarily pushed in that areas. So that's one. Secondly, monetary, right? Because if we're looking at head of household, which is not always true in this 2024, but it still fits, right? And then the last one is to be honest, let's say I'm fine with the money. I'm fine, right? I'm fine with the money and I'm fine with whatever I said first. But I walk in and I don't see any other me's. Yes. I'm not fine with that, right? Because if we go back to when we were talking about with Sydney, the father violence, it's that safe place. Yes. And it's not that you're going to be unsafe, but let's be perfectly honest. Seeing some individuals that look like you right, is okay, is a good, safe thing. I agree. You find out later that it may not be, but initially,
Now you were in our early learning and one could also expand that really to just early childhood and then in early childhood. There's a lack thereof. And there's a lack of pathways or folks going into that profession in general. Right. So then if you scale it down even more and looking at males, it had already been scarce. Correct. And so now it's even more so. In that group, that was more early childhood. Within our organization, I think there's more, but there could be. Yeah. And and like I said, I'm only going by what I see. That little sample. Right. Yeah. So I wasn't going to make a broad statement. With that said, I do know, because if you go into a classroom, it isn't like you see a lot of males, or if they do, they're not going to community work. Right. They're going, or they're there because they job sent them there, or they're a supervisor in it. You see what I mean? Yes. So they're not there organically because this is what I want to do. So it's not something as it relates to your organization. This is across the board. Across the board, right? You go to classrooms, you go to organizations, you go to private practices. Yes. You just don't see men. And so I didn't want to make a generalization. I just want to just talk a little bit about how we can do better on that. And then also with me, right? Going and talking to different places, showing that this can be a viable option for you. And I really... Keep going. Oh, I really think that was wonderful for them to see, to be honest, Eric, because obviously the content, but also there's this Black man talking about this. Yeah. And I think that was very important. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming and appreciate you inviting me. Big shout out to Benita, right? Because she the one got us. She the one got us connected. But I appreciate you coming through. You did an excellent job. Like I said, after I found out that this whole thing was about self-care, and that is my wheelhouse, right? I mean, people that listen know that one of my missions of the organization that my wife and I founded is we feed into the people that are there with us. Yes. So I appreciate that. Any way to reach you before we jump out? Because we got... Go ahead. I mean, I'm on Instagram, Ayana_beautiful flower. That's where I'll mostly be. But you can also find me on Facebook, Tanese.
All right. Well, I thank you for coming out. I thank you for spending time and enjoying a little bit. This is Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. Next week, we got Brother to Brother. We're going to have everybody in here, and we're gonna just talk a little bit, brother to brother. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.